Okay, what's up, everybody? Time for another one, and this is going to be a small series of sorts. I figured it would be pretty cool to go through all of the steps in a very lengthy, detailed explanation of how I'm gonna make a print. I already have a vision. I have a big old vision in my mind. You sometimes you're just kind of sitting there, you got nothing to draw, and then it hits you. You get a vision, and you're like, okay, this this can go somewhere. And so that's where I'm at right now. And I think this series is going to be really helpful for you because in the creation of a print, I'm going to go through basically all the steps, and uh, it's going to be so many tutorials in one little series. You know what I mean? The print we're going to make is a My Hero Academia Villains version of this sucker. This was a good experience going through this whole process the first time in 2020, as I learned a lot, and the original idea of it was not going to be My Hero Academia. I actually hit a pretty hard art block and just started drawing poses, and those poses started looking like My Hero characters, so they just slowly became the pro heroes one after another. And I'm excited for this one because with the villains, they're a bit more animated and evil, and so all of their poses will be distinctly different from the heroes version. So I've got a list. I've got 10 villains, as there's 10 pro heroes on the other print, so I picked out 10 of the villains that I'm going to put on this print, and I'm just going to kind of uh, relay to you and try and outline my thoughts and ideas when going into posing, and by the end of this thing, you will hopefully be able to take away some knowledge to help go off and make your own print. So, I want to start with Mr. Compress. There's a few things I want to make stand out, like his crazy jacket and his hat. And I see in the anime he takes his mask off sometimes, so I think I'm going to have him taking his mask off and kind of making a evil-ish face. But right now, I'm just not going to be thinking about details. I'm mostly going to be thinking about just, gesture and very loose posing, which I'm going to be teaching you in this video. And so, with all that being said, hopefully you made it through this 2 minute and 30-second intro. I promise they won't be that long in each of these videos of the series. I just wanted to kind of go in and let you know. But, let's get started. So with Mr. Compress, I want to really kind of gesture out his crazy jacket and throw in that line of action, kind of work it into the pose. You're going to see I do a lot of just adjustments using the lasso tool. There's the crosshair there, just kind of want to tilt his head upwards and have his eyes looking down at us a bit. You can see with the top line and with that line up there representing his arms, I was thinking I wanted him to have them spread out, doing a very showman, dramatic type pose. But yes, when you're going into these poses, it's like you don't have to worry about faces or details of clothing. You just got to get the gesture down. And it's all very loose shapes, like we got his big hat, just literally an oval. Oh, that's something I love about Procreate, by the way, is after you make a shape, you can kind of readjust the placement of it. So it's super helpful when trying to come up with a little sketch. But we're adding in his hat now. Like I said, no details of the feather, just literally a line. Just be as loose as possible with it, okay? Whenever I'm developing poses on anything, I'm just not thinking about any of those. I'm thinking about just eyeballing, just kind of pulling back and eyeballing it and saying to myself, does this look right? And trying to kind of picture what the final version of the image is going to look like while still sort of keeping a very, very sort of loose gesture of it. Like, look at those salad fingers, come on, They're not going to look like that, but I'm just placing that hand there so I know that the hand's going to be there, okay? All the refining comes later. Right now, it's just place the body parts where they need to be and get this pose just loosely blocked out. So you can see he's got his pointy demon finger down there. just kind of representing that he's got one finger up, but you can kind of see that he's holding his mask. I'm going to throw in a very loose-ish face just to kind of give the idea. I think I'm going to have him have his tongue out. He has his little in capture ball things that he has. I'm going to just put them on the tongue there. Kind of tighten up the arms a bit, make them less stick figure-y. But like I said, like I'm saying, you're not shooting for the moon with this pose. That's later. But it's all adjustments and what feels right. When it comes to anatomy and everything, I'm not worrying about that. It's just kind of getting the gesture, and that's something that you're going to learn over time. If you just keep drawing, you'll kind of gain the skill of being able to eyeball things, and just kind of estimate if something looks right, which is pretty much what I'm doing most of the time. I have my pretty loose-ish idea here, so now it's just, I'm going to refine a couple things, but not enough to just waste my time doing something that I can do later. Get the mask on there. For the legs, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, so I kind of experimented a bit, which is okay, because you're in the sketch phase. You can experiment, you can do anything you need in this. This is the part where you just play around, and because you don't want to be getting to the part where I'm like printing out the sketch and inking it, and I'm like, I want this leg to be somewhere else, because you're kind of setting yourself up to fail there. So this is the best part where it's like anything is possible. So we'll throw in that little jacket. My favorite thing about folds is doing that little sort of swoopty-whoopty thing. And it is 2 times speed, by the way, because if we were doing 1 time speed, we'd be here for hours. And I want to be able to get through this and not give you like a 10-hour course. So, yeah, probably each of these videos are going to be around 30 minutes long. And I'm estimating about 5 or 6, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm just going to hit that curve, use Liquify to just really accentuate it and push that sort of curve he's got going on with his gesture, because we need to just, bring out the showman he is. And at this point, it looks like I'm feeling good about the pose. Now it's just adjustments, changing up a few things to kind of make it feel a bit more ready to be inked, or ready to be officially sketched out with the details and everything, which is going to come later. But now I'm just adjusting small things. How do I want it to look? Take the hat, it looks a little weird. Kind of tip it a bit. And one thing that's always fun is when you get your whole pose done, it's kind of fun to just take the head and, turn it and just see if it looks better with like his head being cocked a different way. And sometimes it works like that. You can see it feels like it adds a little bit more personality. It almost feels like he's waving high, but we'll leave that just because I kind of like the pose. So just when you see this later on in the print, just don't picture him waving high. Just picture him just like, because that totally makes sense. Now getting to this point, it's just going to be a ton of minor adjustments, mostly using Liquify and the lasso tool, just because it's faster to do that than to erase and redraw something, because I'm able to just kind of move a body part or something into the area I want it to be without, it's just more accurate, And so yeah, minor adjustments. And at this point, you're going to notice I didn't like that hand. Get rid of the hand, because like I said, we're in the sketch phase, baby. We can do anything. And so I'm going to turn it a bit. And it also creates a bit more interesting of a silhouette, It kind of loops, it has a loop from going up his body and then up his arm and then off of his hand, kind of loops around, and it's going to change the direction of your eye, and maybe I'll put a character above him, so it'll just like kind of shoot off and you'll be able to see what character's above him or something. So that's a Mr. Compressed sketch right there. Now, going back real quick I'm listening back to the audio of recording this, and I'm just gonna say sorry for the tapping and the metronome effect that you can hear in the background, the click, click, click. That's because idly, while I was talking, I was just kind of moving my legs and it was hitting the microphone, so I'm gonna be very aware about not doing that going forward, so it's not annoying to you. Um, as that was pretty annoying to listen to. So, anyways, let's get into Dobby. He's going to be much more different than Compress, a bit more fierce, vicious. His arms are going to be just spread out, but in a different way. Maybe his hands are open. He's got some flames ready to shoot at you. So we'll gesture out the fact that his hands are up and out, kind of summoning fire. Kind of raise that pinky there, to make sure you split the fingers up to create an interesting silhouette. But now moving into his explosive looking hair, similar to Bakugo, but black basically. Seeing as I want his head to be a bit more facing downward and his eyes facing forward and up, I'm going to have most of the hair kind of taking up the space of the head. It's different to Compress. One thing I'm thinking about is how I can keep the variation between every character so it doesn't feel like I'm just giving them the same pose for every one, because that could just be boring. I want to each give them a pretty unique pose. And he has this crazy trench coat that kind of is all ripped at the bottom, which helps for another silhouette opportunity. You can have it all fanned out. But right now we're doing the walking forward leg. And one of my favorite things to help kind of push the fact that they're walking forward is if you look at the bottom of the foot, that shape really helps kind of anchor the idea that they are walking forward, just that sort of bean-like shape where it's the underside of the foot. That really kind of helped me when I was not sure on how to do a forward walking pose. But we have him kind of confidently walking forward. His shoulders and his waist are opposite from each other. Fan out that jacket. Keep the asymmetry right. I'm going to push forward both shoulders just to kind of push that sort of head down feel. He's like coming at you very, very intently, wanting to flame you up, dude. He wants to set you on fire. He wants to end you. So we got these flames just kind of enveloping his hands. And we got that bean shape at the bottom of his foot. And for pants, you always want to make sure you add some sort of slack, some scrunchiness. His shirt isn't tucked in, so I want to indicate that by doing another swiggly swoosh of just kind of folds being spread out down at the bottom. You'll see that I don't do the classic structure skeleton very often. Seeing as I have the luxury of digital art, I can just use Liquify and Lasso tool to eyeball it. So that's kind of mostly how I'm going to get through these things. While the structure skeleton is very useful in most cases, just for me, I've been drawing forever, so I honestly, I would try and teach it to you, but I don't really know how to do it myself, just because that was just kind of how I evolved. I just never really put down that general skeleton and then drew the body over it. It was just all kind of eyeballing it, erasing, and replacing. But yeah, we're going to get his hand flipped forward the other direction just to add some asymmetry to the pose. And that's something I'll always think about when I'm just doing an idle pose. Not in this case because he's walking forward and also summoning fire, but instead of just a very stiff standing pose, add some weight to it, make them lean a bit, make their head be cocked a bit, just add a bit more personality to it. And that's something to think about while coming up with poses, is just, what body part can I adjust to make it more interesting to look at. But yeah, I'd say that's a Dobby pose. I'd say that's good to go. Let's move on to the next one. Sometimes I'll just kind of copy the layer and duplicate it just to sharpen the lines and kind of accentuate them a bit. But next up, we're going to do Twice, going down the list. 2 down, 8 to go. And Twice is going to be fun because I think I want to do his copy effect also. So it's going to be like drawing 3 characters instead of 1. And also, I'm not placing any of the characters yet, but I think I want him to be in the air. So going to give him a bit more of a jumping pose, kind of jumping at you instead of walking, to help, again, vary it up. So I'm going to puff his chest out, kind of use that arch on top of the head, and pretty much, takes away any visibility of the neck, just to kind of show that his chest is puffed out in front of his head. Kind of gesture out his legs where his knees would be. I want to add some dynamics with his little measuring tape thing that he like pulls out from his wrist. So I think that'll add like a really interesting sort of line that can break him up a bit. So I'm gonna throw his hand up here, kind of, grappling on to that little measuring tape, and just have his other arm stretched out. So it really like creates that arc. And that's one thing I'm always doing when looking at characters' poses. I'm just looking for opportunities or, techniques or whatever that can just spread out the pose in general. If it's a weapon or if it's just a special move or anything really, just to help fan out the pose. Like if you think of, one of those closey fans that opens, you don't want a closey fan pose. You want an open fan, And that's just another amazing bite of input from yours truly. Always think of an open fan when you're making a pose. Stupid. But anyways, you can see his little measuring tape there. Kind of helps break it up. Adds a bit more white space in between the arms and the head. And I'm thinking about his legs right now. I'm thinking about, I want to give them like a Spider-Man-esque type of situation where they're both bent backwards. And usually when doing that, you're not thinking about the bottom part of the leg. With the calf and everything, they could just be peeking out from behind the knee. But then again, going back to the whole asymmetry idea of it, I think I want to make that right leg a bit more interesting. Maybe it's a bit more stretched out, or maybe it's coming forward instead of backwards. So I'm doing some experimenting here to see, how do I like it best? Using that bean shape to represent the bottom of the foot. But going back to my whole fan concept, I feel like it's not open enough. So maybe instead of having it come forward and foreshortening the leg, we can just have him just kick that leg out completely. Now, I don't know why my recording didn't pick up me changing that adjustment, but whatever, I guess it felt more magical that way. But you get the idea. Just fanning out his leg instead of having his feet go back. Both of them are being kind of shown to the camera. So it looks like maybe he's jumping back a bit to pull out his measuring tape. And now moving on, I think that's a pose for the main twice. The other two I have in my head when I actually render them. They're going to be a bit more, a bit less saturated, a bit further back to create the depth between them. But I think I want to give this one like a silly pose because he has all those different personalities. So maybe he's like got his hands up on his face and he's like throwing up a peace sign or something, a bit more kawaii. I want to make sure the personality in each of these poses kind of differ from each other. So maybe he's leaned forward, so I'll represent that by the upper body just being a bit widened with the lower body kind of curving in a bit. Kick out that leg a bit, Continue. I didn't really think this stupid fan concept would be apt to the whole thing, but I mean, it's kind of it kind of relates. It works. But I promise you, I'll try to come up with a better analogy. But for now, just spreading out his legs will do the trick. And now moving on to this one, instead of silly and kawaii, I want this one to be like, he's pissed off. He's like way more pissed off than the original twice. So we got some steam shooting from his ears. I don't know if that's a thing that happens. I mean, he is wearing a full mask, so maybe the steam wouldn't really come through it. But you know what? Steam really kind of pushes that pissed off feel. But we have his hands like clutched, similar to Dobby's on his right one. Kind of helps portray that anger emotion a bit more. And again, no details, We're not putting in his suit details. We're not caring about the anatomy or the muscles. We just want the silhouette. That's all we want out of these poses for all these characters, because at the end of the day, they're all going to need to be grouped together and kind of placed in strategically so they can each be, have their own spotlight on the print. And you got to keep in mind that you might have to change something if it just doesn't look right when all of the characters are finally grouped together. So right now, I'm just kind of focusing on laying it all down, and then we're going to construct the print's composition eventually. That's after I get all the characters done. And I think that's going to be in the next video. I'm going to try to time it so I can do the next 5 and then also compile them all together. Or maybe that should just be a video in itself. I don't know. If you actually make it this far, let me know. But if not, if I don't get any comments, then I'll just figure it out as I go. Because, this whole video thing is new to me, so we'll just do it. But yeah, there's Twice. I changed his hands up, kept that asymmetry, very important. So yeah, Twice done. Next up, Toga. Now she has a few things that we can do to really make the pose interesting. For example, spreading her legs, but with her knees a bit more bowed and inward, kind of push that female look of it. And I want to add the blood in there as another kind of way to fan it out a bit. And her like needle situation that has the cord attached to it. So I'm just trying to figure out how I want that to look. So we're going to do that very rough sort of curvy hip shape. And then add those legs kind of bowing out. Give her a bit more of a zombie-esque feel. She's not a zombie, but just kind of have her a bit more lazily posing, if that makes sense. And I'll pop the hip out on the right, and with that, I'll have to create that sort of curve, right? I want to have it like all curved up into her head, and just really sort of dramatize the way the legs are being spread out. And I'll throw in her little scarf thing. And so when it comes to the blood, one thing I want to do is just have her arm just like shooting out, holding the knife, just completely almost in the most straightest of a line. And then we break the straightness of that line up with the blood, creating that sort of arc. And again, just, adding more to the blank space that is going to be her pose. And it kind of has that whole arc above her head, which helps just kind of encapsulate her whole upper body in a way. It kind of frames it. And then with her other hand, with her like blood-sucking needle thing, I don't super know the logistics of her quirk, but I know she holds it, so I'm going to put it into the print. But yeah, she's going to be holding that, I think, sort of like a pencil in a way, and just have it kind of going up on the other side, and then the whole cord is going to help create more, just an additional piece that will help fan out the pose and, keep it asymmetrical. And she has more of those sort of needle things attached to her like scarf thing. Oh my god, just don't hate on me because I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what? You get it, okay? You know what I'm doing. You can see what I'm doing. I'm sorry that I don't have the super technical terms of all of Toga's specific clothing details, but you get it. So I'm just going to be adjusting her pose a bit more. Now that it's done, hit it with the classic liquefy and lasso tool to just really accentuate the things I want. And then we'll move on to the next one. We're just chopping through these. 4 down. Next one. It's going to be all for one. And I'm just kind of, there's beginning to get too many characters on this sheet, so I need to help organize myself a bit. So I name all the layers. They're all going to be on separate layers because I'm going to need to overlap them when I'm putting the composition together. I don't really know how it's going to look yet, but I know that I want some people in the air and some people on the ground. And I'm going to do Gigantomachia as kind of like a good way to sort of mirror Mount Lady. that I have in the other print. So yes, let us continue to All for One. And I know he doesn't really do a lot of fighting in the series, or he's not going to be like fighting with the villains as they're like going to war or whatever. Or maybe, I don't know, it hasn't gone that far in the story, but I'd still want to put him in there because he's important. He's a very important villain, and his whole like giant arm situation that he had against All Might in season 3 was just so epic. So I'm just gonna, it's my print. I'm making up the rules as I go. So I think he should be in there as part of all of the main villains. So I'm going to give him that like crazy huge arm situation, and he's just gonna be. I think seeing as he is kind of the central villain of the whole plot, other than Shigaraki, who I also plan to be in the middle. He's gonna be in the middle, but in the sky, just floating. Because that's like what he's doing in the show, right? He's like up in the air. So I'm gonna give him that sort of like curled fist for that giant quirk arm, and probably change up both of his legs, make one leg kind of kicked back and one kicked forward to help kind of push that asymmetry of the pose again. I know there should be a counter of how many times I say asymmetry, but I don't want to go through all that work. I don't have an editor. I'm not hiring one, so I'm just out here doing this on my own. But yes, I'm gonna throw his arm up. I think if it's like raised to the heavens, it'll really kind of define the power of this man. Same with, I think, opening his fist into more of like an open hand, because I think it'll just help make it a bit more interesting. There's some cases where a closed fist will make a character feel more powerful, but I think in this case, like opening his hand on both hands really will just kind of accentuate his like godlike presence, I guess, And we're gonna have his head just kind of sitting on top with his weird neck brace thing. Got his suit like opening up. Want to make sure that we're following the logic of clothes, so they'll just be kind of opened up as both of his arms are. Give him that sort of flying pose and have it all kind of convex down to that one foot. And yeah, I think I removed this arm. I don't think I like it. I remake it again just because I think, we're in the pose phase. So if something doesn't look right, this is the best time to kind of redo it. It won't take too long. And I feel like it didn't come off as big and menacing enough, because that damn arm is huge. It has a lot of quirks stored up into it, so I want to make sure it's like almost a character of its own. So we'll do a couple test arms, maybe have it fanned out or curled back in, but not so much this time. I think what I want to do is have it a bit curled in, but not all the way, kind of a happy medium between the two. Mostly because I got to keep in mind there's going to be 10 characters, and it'll most likely get covered if it's just fanned out that far. So it's all about trying to, like, while you want to make your pose as wide as possible, also keeping it a bit more compact because of how many characters are going to be on the print. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm also thinking about how I'm going to draw them. They're going to each be on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, so I want them to be able to fit. But yeah, this is I think how All for One's going to look. He's just going to be floating up, arms reaching out to the heavens, and just kind of looking over the rest of the villains, you know what I mean? And all that detail is going to come later. So we have our 5 villains. We're halfway through this print. So hopefully you bear with me as I go through this series, stumbling along and trying to explain my process as I create it. I think it's going to be fun seeing it go from nothing to a complete piece, which I can list on my shop and also pair with the other Pro Hero print I made. But next, we got on the list here, we got Shigaraki, Kurogiri, Gigantomachia, Redestro, and Spinner. I wanted to do Redestro just because I love his design, but yeah, get ready for part 2. Here it comes. Stick around, stay tuned. I'm going to shoot for next week, same day. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want to kind of stay with me on this journey. And thanks for watching, everyone.